My paranormal experiences had a big effect on my life. My family, I could always see the supernatural. Grandmother, grandfather, siblings, cousins. We lived in a small house, and we always had a problem with unexplained occurrences, like wiggling handles, faucets turning on, drawers opening. And it happened so often that it came to be normal for us, and we eventually named it Charlie. That's what we named it. I believe it attached to us, every one of us. And I was older when I realized that this might have happened. When I moved into an apartment with some roommates, they informed me every time they were alone, drawers open or the faucets turning on. And when I left, they said it stopped. There was a particular time when I was young when this handle wiggled. We were all sitting in the living room watching a movie, and I can still remember it like it was yesterday. I went over there to check out why the handle was wiggling. I thought maybe my uncle was in the room trying to mess with us because that's what he always liked to do. And I opened the door to give him a surprise. But to my surprise, there was nobody there. So I shut the door and shook my head and just said, "Oh, Charlie," and sat back down on the couch watching the movie with my cousins. But it was nothing compared to this very first solo experience I had. I guess I was 8 or 9. No, I was younger than that. About 5 or 6. And I was sleeping on a couch and it was late at night where I decided to sleep. And in between the blinds and the window, I could see outside. And everyone was asleep. No one was awake. It was just me and trying to go to bed, trying to shut my eyes. Always had a problem sleeping. Always was the last one to fall asleep, felt like. And I was just looking up at the stars through that little crack, and I noticed this neon color coming forward and getting brighter. And it finally seemed like some type of appendage just barely touching the window. It was glowing. It was neon green. And it scared the crap out of me. I was so scared I couldn't talk. I was frozen. And it was like I couldn't look away. I was trapped in I was hypnotized or mesmerized. But at the same time, I was just so scared. And then, as the appendage just rested on the window or the screen, it had like a purple vein just start wrapping around its appendage. And it was a neon purple looking thing, and I could still remember it so clearly. It eventually went away, and I eventually fell asleep. So terrified, but I don't know. I could just fall back to sleep. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. I'm not sure. But it happened every night. Every single night for about a week. There's a few times where I try to whisper for help. My grandma was in the other room. It was just I don't know why I kept sleeping there and just kept on wanting to see it. But at the same time, I was so scared. I finally got the courage to open the blinds. It was probably that Friday. It happened on a Monday. And it never came back. I finally got the courage to open the blinds, and I was going to open it up and see what it was. And it just never appeared that night. And I never really told any of my family or anything about that, because they would have just said that it was nothing, or it was probably Charlie messing with me. And it's just a normal thing. So I guess I didn't say anything. Years later, I've talked to my wife about it. She's just amazed by it. She believes me. Why would I make it up? I guess a few years later, another weird thing has happened. I ended up seeing this thing I didn't know anyone else saw. I thought it was just like a squiggly in my eye. Or, I don't know. It was a shadow figure with a hat on top of him. And it was in the broad daylight. My dad, he bought us go-karts. And we had a little patch of like land behind his yard, and it looked like it was an abandoned lot, and they built houses around it and had overgrown shrubs and trees. And growing up, we used it as a track for our go-karts or our dirt bikes or whatever my dad got us, or our neighbors would bring over and ride with us. And I never went alone. We were always in a pack driving around. And my dad always watched us. And we were young when he got these things for us. And eventually he was so confident of our abilities to ride by ourselves, he just said, go ahead and just start it up whenever you want. And I don't know why my brother or neighbors weren't with me one day, but I just was feeling kind of bored, and I wanted to go and ride the go-kart. And I started it up, and I had a weird feeling that something was watching me, like a turning in my stomach. I never felt the feeling of that other than when I was looking out the window, and I seen that appendage on the glass window or screen or whatever it was. I can't remember if we had a screen or not. Then I got into the go-kart, and I did a lap into the wooded area, and when I came back out, there was like a little turnabout when you come back out of the wooded area and you go back into it. And it was part of the whole track. And it looked like somebody, like a neighbor, something, was walking towards me. But they weren't walking, they were staring at me, I guess you'd say. And it was up there on the hill when you're going into the woods. And it's kind of like a slight hill. And it was on the top, and I looked at it, or I thought it was thought it was a neighbor that I'd never seen before, because I knew all of our neighbors, and I couldn't make out the face or anything like that. It just looked like it had a hat on. He had a hat on, a robe or something, and it just was staring. I couldn't blink for a long time. It felt like forever, but I'm sure it was just seconds. I finally blinked, and it went away. I was really terrified, scared, and I thought it was a squiggly in my eyes, one of them squiggly lines. I brushed it off like it was nothing, and I drove right back into the woods, and that's what we called this little patch of overgrown trees, the woods. And I did another lap, and sure enough, when I came back, it was there, looking at me again. This time I unbuckled myself from the go-kart seat and stood up out of it. And as I stood up, I wasn't taking my eyes off of it, because I even looked to the left and right to see if it was a 3D or like I don't know how to explain it, like a 3D person, like if I could see maybe the light behind it. I didn't see anything. It was just like a flat surface that was standing up. It was strange. And I finally had to blink. When I did blink, it went away. And I just pushed my go-kart back. This other incident happened. My grandmother lived down the road from my dad's house. I'd say about 10 houses down. It was a little short walk, and everyone knew everybody on the road. So around 11 or 12 years old, I was able to go down the road by myself without anybody with me. It was late at night too, and I liked staying at my grandma's house more than staying at my dad's or my mom's or anybody else's house. It was fun there. And I asked my dad if I could go down there. And he told me, yeah, go ahead, go. And it was about 9 or 10 at night. And I went ahead, started walking down the road. And I got closer to my grandma's house. And that same feeling came over me that I felt when I was riding those go-karts all over again. Like somebody was watching me. My gut was turning. I felt like I could feel my heart beating through my neck. I don't know how to explain that, but I also felt like when someone's looking at you, you can kind of feel them, and you kind of look who's looking at you, and a lot of the times you make eye contact with that person. Well, I don't know what it was, but it made me look up on top of a roof, and there was some dog up there. It was a weird looking, like rough looking dog. It looked like kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. It was my mind as I'm thinking about it. It's just, it was shaped as a dog, but I couldn't figure out what kind of dog it was. And why would it be on the top of a roof? So I just, the same thing happened. I blinked and it went away. It was something short, something fast. Kind of terrified me. No, it scared the crap out of me, and I ran to my grandma's house. I didn't know if it was going to jump down, come after me, what, but it didn't. But it was definitely a scary experience. It never happened to me again after that. No, I never happened to see that dog shadow thing ever again. It's like my mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing, so it transformed the dog or the creature into what I would think a dog would look like. It's strange. But like I said, it never happened again. The next weird thing that happened to me, I think this was like the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. I was 16 and staying at my dad's house, and he built me a bedroom in the basement because by this time I was staying with him now full time. Yeah. He made the basement into a livable room. And as I got older, I realized it was what people would say sleep. It was sleep paralysis, but I don't think it was. I think it was something different. The room got extremely cold. And that's what woke me up. I was cold. I was covered up. And the bed started shaking. I felt like I couldn't move. All of the experiences, somebody would say, is sleep paralysis. All of the symptoms. But it was kind of like the shadow dog. I couldn't figure out what was on my chest, what was keeping me from moving. All I knew was really bright, and I couldn't really look at it. And when I did look at it, it looked like a little kid in a dress, like a little girl holding me down. A bright little, I don't know. And I couldn't move. And I tried with all my might to move. And I couldn't move. I finally gave up, and I just said if it was going to end my life, then whatever. And I kind of went limp. It went away. And I looked around, and I turned on my light, and it was nothing. There was nothing there. I knew it was something to deal with the supernatural, but I didn't know it would affect me so bad. I went back to sleep and just didn't think anything of it. Just whatever, another supernatural occurrence. But when I woke up the next day, I had something written on my forearm. It was a name, and it read Bob. And I had this weird date in my head. It was July 2021. No, it wasn't. I can't remember the date. I know it was July 2012. That's what the year was. And I had no idea what the name meant or the date. I went upstairs and I seen my stepmom crying. I had no idea what she was crying about, and I didn't want to ask her what was wrong. It just kind of just gave her space to cry. And whenever I got the chance, I walked up to my dad and asked why she was crying or looked so sad. He said that her dad died that night. She just got the news. And I was curious, she never talked about him or who he was. And I didn't even think she even had a father. So I asked my dad what his name was. He told me it was Bob. I was so freaked out. I couldn't believe that. And I showed him my arm. I told him I woke up with this on me. His eyes widened, and so did my stepmom's. They widened, they got really wide. They looked at each other. They just said, wow, that's the weirdest thing. That was it. I mean, nothing else came from that, except when the date came, finally, July 2012, it was definitely a life-changing event. I won't go into detail, but it did change my life. It was about a couple years after that date happened, 2012. I was about 23 years old, sitting on the couch in my new apartment. It was a townhouse. It was late at night, and I was just watching TV. My wife was asleep in the other room, and all the lights were off, except the TV in the living room. I was laying down on the couch, and I thought I seen her running across the kitchen, and I thought she was going to play a trick on me and scare me, but as I got up and started walking towards the light to turn it on, I realized that wasn't how tall she was. It was short. It was like a little kid. And when I turned the light on, I looked around. There was nobody in the kitchen. I walked down the hallway and asked her if she was in the kitchen, but she kind of mumbled what she was saying because she was asleep. She was dead asleep. Like, she didn't even realize what I was asking her. She just was mumbling. So I knew it wasn't her, of course. And I don't know. I guess after that night, I got really, really curious. Really curious of what's going on. What am I? What's happening? What are these things I keep seeing? These shadowy creatures. And I looked it up, and I seen that there was. I thought I was, I guess, not right. I guess I was ill or sick, or I was making things up in my head and truly believing it. And I don't know. I thought I was going insane. And when I looked these things up, I was wondering if other people could see them or hear them or whatever, like I did. They have tons of information out there. There's about the shadow people and these strange occurrences. So I told myself, I am so curious. If this happens again, I'm going to have to. I would like to speak to it. I would like to push past my fear and see if I could speak to these things or talk to them, or at least try to move and get up and go towards them. I guess it was just really calm, and for years, nothing happened. And turned about 27, and I guess, sleeping with my wife. We were just sleeping, and I woke up for some reason. I don't know why. And there the hat person was right in front of me. Again, the same thing I seen when I was a kid. Right there in front of me. And I told myself I have to get up and I want to talk to this thing. But I don't want my wife to get hurt in case it's like a evil entity or something. So I remembered what stopped it the original time that it happened. The first time it happened, I went completely limp, and I stopped struggling against this force that was being pushed against me or on top of me, and it went away. It did leave me terrified. Hopefully it wouldn't happen again. But it also left me more determined than ever to reach out to it again. And, well, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I felt it again. But this time, my wife wasn't in the bed. She was in the other room, sleeping with our daughter. And it was just me alone in my bed. And I remember telling her, after I seen the hat person, hat man or whatever, I told her, if I ever wake up and I'm like deceased, just know that I went after this hat person and I couldn't win or whatever. I couldn't win the conversation or whatever happened. That's what's going on. And with me knowing that she knows if something happens to me in my sleep, made me feel a little more courageous. And since she's in the other room with our daughter, and it's just me in this room, and these thoughts of being reassured going through my mind, when it finally happened a couple weeks ago, I was able to move and push past my fears. And as I got up to latch onto this thing, I went through it, and all I seen, it was like a thought of every single dream that I had that night come forward, and I was placed back into my bed, and I was sitting up just as I was reaching out for it. It was strange. I mean, I was scared, but I'm more curious than being scared. I was sitting up in my bed, and it was gone, and I felt like I got some answers from that experience of what it might be. It might be I don't know. I just got up, and I felt like I got some relief that I can push through that paralyzed feeling and know if I reach out to it, it'll disappear. And that's, I don't know. All the dreams I've had through that night come forward. I remember them all, and I just feel more secured now that I can reach out and stop it from making me scared, because as soon as I reached out and it disappeared, the fear was gone. I stood up and I went to the bathroom and put water on my face. And I just couldn't believe I did that. I finally was able to do that. All I wanted to do was just speak to it. Ask it questions like where it's from. Of course, it happens again the next night. This time it was a lot easier to shake off or to wiggle out of its trance or whatever, and it disappeared again, and I got up and did the same thing that I did the night before, put water on my face and kind of look in the mirror and say, oh my goodness, how did that happen? Shocked. I was able to do it again. And the same exact thing happened with all the dreams that I had that night came forward as I reached for it. I went back to the very first dream I had that night, and all the way up to the dream I just woke up from. It's the feeling that you get when you reach out and grab it, or the vision, or whatever you see. And yeah, it's pretty easy for me to go back to sleep after that too. Just go back and lay down. Definitely flip feet. I definitely feel accomplished knowing that if it happens again, I can make it less terrifying. So, yeah, it's that fear that I got when it first happened a couple weeks ago, the very first time. The only way I was able to knock myself out of it was pretty much swear at it and tell them that I was going to beat it up, but in a more vulgar manner. And it's just like it backed off. And then the second time, it barely showed itself. The next day, it didn't really show its physical body. It just made me feel like it was crawling on the bed this time. And that's the last of all the supernatural experiences I had.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.